Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen W. Long. This is The Writing Life, and so pleased to have today a kind of a special guest, Mackenzie Adix, and we're going to talk about, among other things, NaNoWriMo, and I want to talk about your work as well. But first, welcome.
Thank
Hi.
you.
I know a little bit about it. You know more. Can you kind of explain NaNoWriMo?
Yes, so the idea is that you have 1 month to write a draft of a novel or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really geared toward drafting a novel, but you can work on whatever project you want. And the idea is to write 50,000 words toward whichever project you're working on. So most people do novels, but some people do a bunch of short stories.
Could be a collection.
A collection, poetry, whatever they want to work on. It's
Okay.
really a choose your own adventure type of thing.
Okay. And we learned just before we started here that this started in 1999, and the fellow's name was Chris Beatty, and started small. I think, didn't they say 50 participants first time around?
Yeah, like less than 100.
Yeah. Now, and we talked a little bit about this, but you're a participant. It's not a contest. I mean, that's maybe what I'm...
Right, well, you're kind of competing just against yourself. It's the idea is to challenge yourself to meet that 50,000 word goal, word count goal, along with millions of other, I don't know millions, but thousands of other people throughout the world who are also doing this same program at the same time. So you have that support network. You're all working toward the same goal. You're doing it individually, but you're also part of groups if you want to be. And sometimes schools and libraries and places like that, they'll organize like write-in events where everybody gathers together, and sometimes it'll be like an hour or two, and the idea is to just write as much as you can, as fast as you can, and then sometimes people will share a little bit of their work when they're done. So some of those events can be really fun too.
Yeah, and obviously you've been to that.
I haven't actually been to the in-person events, just with conflicts with work and school in the past, but I'm hoping to do some more of those this year.
Now you live in Salem, is that correct?
I work in Salem, yeah.
Oh, you work in Salem, okay, because I was going to say here in McMinnville, we're going to have Maggie Stuckey is going to do a thing. And are you going to be able to go visit her? I'm
going to try,
yeah. We had her on the show the other day, and that really should be terrific. You participated in this now a couple, 3 times, 4 times maybe?
Yeah, 3 or 4 times, I think.
Okay. I haven't done the math on this, but depending on the number of days in the month, what do you got to do? A couple thousand words?
So if you want to write the same number of words every day and hit that 50,000 word goal in the month of November is when we do it. You have to write 1,667 words per day.
You have done the math.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then the website, it has a word counter. So each day you can put in your word count, and it keeps track for you, and it makes a really nice graph. So you can see your progress visually. So it's a really great motivator to get those word count to get those words in every day, because knowing you get to plug it in and see your progress go up and up and up, ideally.
I love it. So again, I may repeat myself, but you've done this 3 times or 4 times, but the last time you did accomplish your goal.
Yes, 2017 was the first time I officially won.
Okay.
And by winning, that just means you meet the 50,000 word count goal.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah, and you do get a few different prizes and things.
Really?
So like discounts to different software that's useful to writers, such as Scrivener and Scrapple and I think Ulysses, things like that. And then they give you some like banners that you can put on your social media that says NaNoWriMo winner.
Well, good. Okay, I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, so some of that stuff is really fun.
Now, you talked about support, I think, online, but in person, but the online support. How does that work? Can you give an example of how you were supported?
Yeah, so Participants in NaNoWriMo have the option of joining groups or cabins. They also call them cabins because they do a summer version of NaNoWriMo, and I believe it's in April and July as well. So you can choose whether you want to be in a cabin with, I think it's 10 other writers in your general area, geographic area. And you can message back and forth if you want. Keep track of what everybody's doing and support each other that way.
You know, just to divert or backtrack a little bit, when I took my first writing class, I just loved it. And then some of the students in that class, we all loved it, and we said, let's keep doing this. Let's keep doing this when the class is over. And we formed a little writing group. And I thought this was fabulous, and didn't realize that people do that. And they're all over the place.
Yeah.
So then I went to Squaw Valley, the Squaw Valley Writers Conference, and I was in heaven to know that there's so many people who felt the same as I did. And now this is even, I mean, in terms of scale, much bigger. And and again, if you, I'm assuming that you did join a cabin, or didn't you?
I think I did, last time I did the Camp NaNoWriMo, the summer version. But I was just so focused on my writing, I didn't really do much with it. I just know it's an option.
Okay. And because what I was going to ask, maybe you know, what kind of support would that be? I'm trying to visualize or imagine, would somebody say, oh, I'm stuck on a character, or whatever it is. And then I'm guessing that then somebody would help you with that?
Yeah, you could private message the people in your cabin or group, or you could also, they used to have forums. I'm not sure if they still have them. But forums where you could post different questions that come up, and then there's a whole thread of people giving their advice.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, so some of those are really interesting to look through. And sometimes just looking through there, if I've had a question in the past, I'll see a question that's similar or the same as what I wanted to ask. So then I could read the answers and get some help through that. And then also the folks who run NaNoWriMo, it's a nonprofit, but they put out at least 4 or 5 kind of like pep talk emails that go out to everybody throughout the month. And some of those are by published authors, so there's that professional element involved too. So an author will write like the weekly pep talk and send that out. Yeah, so it's coming from the organization as well.
I was privileged at one point to be in a group led by Elizabeth George, who is quite a successful author. And at Christmas, all of us, we actually met in her house, and I think there was 6 or 8 of us, and we would kind of go together and get her a Christmas gift. But then she got all of us a gift. And one year, I think was, well, I still have it, it's the best gift I ever got. It was a page from a manuscript. And she would compose on the computer, but then she said when it comes time to edit, it's a different experience to get the paper in your hand and actually mark on the paper. So each of us got a framed page of a manuscript with all of her corrections. And I think that the lesson there was editing, is rewriting, is going back and looking at this thing and not resting on your laurels. You're really trying to make it as good as you can be. And it was an encouragement that somebody who's had such success still has to do that. Because I know I had to do it. Yeah. And then if you can talk a little bit about, you've done the 50,000 words, or you or anybody, but really you're not done, are you?
No, I'm only probably a third of the way through what I've planned to write for this particular project. So really 50,000 words is kind of short for a novel. Usually novels are around 80,000 words. But I think that would just be totally unmanageable in a month for most people. So 50,000 is better.
And I would think you're writing so fast that, again, you're not, so you get 50,000 words or 80,000 words, whatever it is, you're not sending that in. You're not submitting that. That needs to be looked at. It needs some work.
Right. The only thing you have to do is once you hit your word count goal, you have to copy and paste your text into their word count validator.
Okay.
Just to actually verify that you did indeed hit the 50,000
Sure.
word count. But other than that, no, you don't submit it anywhere.
I think it's different writers may be different, but for me, it's better to put it in. If you have an idea, put it in, and then when you want to edit it, it's easier to subtract than to add.
Yeah,
If you
definitely.
if you think you're done and you're reading and you go, oh, there needs to be a transition here. I need to get from here to here. Then to add that later, I think it's more difficult than if you have too much.
Right.
Okay.
I definitely agree with that. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of my vague plan for this novel, is just to write a whole bunch of stuff that,
Good.
yeah, may not necessarily need it. I'll probably end up cutting out a bunch of stuff at the end.
Which I think is appropriate.
Yeah.
And is this the novel? In fact, I want to, The Avian Wager? Is
Yeah,
that, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, that's the working title, yeah.
Okay, okay. I want to approach this a couple of different ways. Let me start with, if you're going to write, you have to read. What do you read? Is it this, are you inspired by what you read, or is that kind of a different thing?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely inspired by what I read and watch.
Okay.
I really like science fiction and fantasy,
Okay.
pretty much anything. So for a long time, that was the only thing I ever read.
Uh-huh.
And more recently, I've started reading in other genres like contemporary fiction and memoirs and things like that, which I think is really useful for character building,
Yeah.
character development. You get a feel for what people are actually like reading somebody's memoir and
Right.
the thoughts that go through their head. And so
Yeah.
that can inform my writing as I'm doing these things in a fiction context.
Okay. It's interesting. Let me say it this way. If you read something that has a different voice and then go write, do you carry that over? Or is your voice strong enough that you're just writing what you're writing? I wondered if you're influenced enough by what you read.
Yeah, I think when I started out, like I started writing consistently probably in middle school. At
Really?
that point, I was very influenced from what I read and
Sure.
what I watched.
Which is appropriate.
Yeah, and I think since then I've taken several creative writing classes in college, which were really fun. They were some of my favorite classes.
Good.
And I think, yeah, just continuing to read a variety of things has helped me not focus in so much on one voice and copying it, but gathering up all the elements that I think are useful or appropriate to the story and combining them to make my own voice for that story.
Right.
And then the other thing for this project I'm working on is I'm trying. It's written in first-person perspective, so
Okay.
I'm really trying to write it from the perspective of that character and use her voice. Dessa is the character's name.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I'm still trying to figure out what exactly that sounds like. I think that's one of those things that I would go back and refine once I start doing some edits.
Yeah, I have an author friend, Charlie Price, who sent me some work recently. In fact, it was 2 pieces. And one was from a first-person point of view, a young lady, I think she's 15, and it's about 1889, and it has to do with Jack the Ripper. So it's in England.
Yeah.
And he said that he researched that vocabulary because you can't say something that they
Right.
wouldn't have said at that time.
Right, you don't want any anachronisms. Am I
Right.
pronouncing that correctly? I
Yeah.
don't know.
And anachronism.
Yeah, anachronism, I think.
And anyway, I read the thing, and it was really fabulous. My wife read it, and she said she had a little bit of trouble with it because it is so different. It's like
Yeah.
if you're watching British TV, you want the subtitles even though it's English.
Yeah.
But then he also sent me something that's very contemporary and a very different philosophy, a different point of view, it's third-person point of view, and a real ne'er-do-well. And I wrote him back and I said, I think a skilled author is like an actor. in that you can create very different characters, but at the moment they're both believable. Even though they're very different, they came from you.
Yeah.
And I just think it's fun. So
Very
would
fun.
you be, you brought us something maybe to read a little bit.
Yeah, I did.
Are you comfortable doing that?
Sure.
Sock it to me.
All right, so this
Okay.
is
Oh, you did? Okay.
not from the NaNoWriMo project, which I'm going to work on again
Right.
this year.
Okay.
It's a flash fiction piece that I wrote during one of my fiction writing classes at George Fox, where I went.
And before you start, let me ask, I know what the words mean, but independently, but flash fiction as a thing, what qualifies as flash fiction?
Well, I've heard different definitions of
Okay.
it, but the one that's kind of stuck in my head is flash fiction is a really, really short story that's generally under 1,000 words.
Okay.
I've also heard like under 750 words
Okay.
as a definition, but this one's about 400 words, so it definitely qualifies.
So, but it doesn't mean that you had to, and this sounds silly, but you didn't write it in a flash. There's no time limit, it's a word limit.
Right.
Okay, all right,
Yeah, strictly a word count limit.
okay.
Which means like you really have to be careful about not having any extraneous words.
Right.
Yeah, you just have to be very careful with the vocabulary, which can be really challenging, but also really fun.
Sure.
Yeah, and some flash fiction I've seen almost reads like poetry.
I'll bet, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really fun medium and really good practice for
Okay.
longer works. Anyway, this one's called Peanut Butter Fudge. I put the plate down next to his gravestone and sank onto the grass. I wasn't going to talk to him. No crazy old woman jabbering to herself among the trees and tombs. No tragic tears. Upper lip stiff as my joints. Emotions brittle as bone. I pulled up the plastic wrap and pinched a fudge cube between my thumb and index finger, letting my nails dig into its soft sides. I raised it like a champagne glass. Here's to death. Then I smashed the fudge against his headstone. I always hated making sweets, batch after batch of chocolate and toffee and caramel and gumdrops in the stifling back room of his shop. He never helped me. He manned the counter out front, smiling and flaunting his lollipops like the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. No, they were my lollipops. I made them, but he never told anyone. A breeze stirred the plastic wrap like an invisible hand, reaching. I picked another cube, the biggest one, swirled brown and tan. I squeezed my eyes shut. He used to call me his little peanut butter cup. He used to name the fudge after me. I never wanted him to, but he never asked. About names, about anything. He bought the shop when I was out of town visiting Mother. When I got back, a tower of candy cookbooks was waiting for me in the kitchen. I burned the books when he died. And then I sold the shop, candy and all. Goodbye to the smothering scent of sugar. Good riddance to the permanently sticky floor. Farewell, no, fare badly, to the caramel turtles and the chocolate raisins, the barrels and barrels and barrels of taffy. I opened my eyes and glanced behind me. The shadows hadn't moved. There was no one around. I looked at the gravestone. Loving father, faithful husband. All lies. A fiery tear slid down each cheek as I stared at the polished marble, hard and white like a jawbreaker, with the colored sugar shell sucked off. He must know the shop was gone. There would be a good view of Earth from down there. Looking back to the living land, watching the world move on without you, that would be worse than a lake of fire, worse than scalding melted sugar spilling on your skin. The fudge cube was softening in my hand, losing shape, edges dissolving into a rounded lump. 6 feet down, the same thing was happening to him.
My goodness.
It's kind of dramatic.
Well, it's wonderful. As you were reading, I thought, 400 words isn't a lot. You got a lot in there. You used your 400 words
Yeah.
very well. One of the things I like about maybe this kind of story is you don't know everything, but it's a snapshot. We're looking at this scene
Right.
and gleaning as much as we can from it. Anyway, well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. This is I don't want to be crass about it, but this seems marketable. Would you send that somewhere?
Yeah, I would definitely consider that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would need to do a little bit of research into. There's lots of places that take flash fiction.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know of a few, but yeah, I feel like this one would be kind of for a specific audience. Like it's a little bit darker
Yeah.
than what I usually write. So
Okay.
yeah, I would definitely be open to that.
You know, this is a bad time to forget, but I get a email nearly every day about writing markets. And I can't think of the name of the website that sends it to me, but there are so many. And one of the things that I rarely respond because they're so specific. But there are, as you said, there are places like that that are looking for, this would almost be Halloween. I mean, it could be.
Yeah.
But they're looking for real specific things. Perceptions magazine is something you might want to check out. But oh, all right. So now that was the short piece. Can you tell me? Well, I want to know about your bigger work.
Sure.
But two things to kind of set the groundwork for that. One is, do you plot? I mean, you don't write the first word, I would think, on the first day of the NaNoWriMo. I mean, you've done some forethought.
Right.
Okay. So is your work plot driven? Do you try and lay that out, outline it? Or is this is a great character and let's see where she takes me? You know, and
Right.
it can be both, but which way do you lean?
I lean a little bit more toward being a plotter versus
Okay.
a pantser.
Yeah.
I've heard the term like flying by the seat of your pants.
Right.
More character driven kind of discovery writing is another term I've heard for it. But yeah,
Right.
I tend to do a little bit of outlining, not a whole lot, but
Okay.
like a short paragraph of what's going to happen in each chapter. And then, I tend to mostly follow that.
Okay.
But if I think of something else cool, like a cool scene that I think would be neat, I just put that in there.
Okay.
And it can always be moved around later or
Yeah.
changed up as needed.
And do you know the end before you start?
Yes.
do you discover
Yeah,
it?
for
Okay.
the current version, yes, I do know the ending.
Okay.
Yeah, which I think is helpful because it makes it a little bit easier to do foreshadowing, easier to set it up without having to go back
Yes.
and do a bunch of changes later.
Yeah. Before we got started, I was talking with one of the fellows here, and saying that this isn't, writing isn't performance art, and that suits me. One of the things that I think a writer can do, and it seems so clever after the fact, are these the foreshadowing, or if it's a mystery, a red herring, something like that.
Yeah.
And you want the reader to think that the story is inevitable. Well, of course it had to go like this. But I think the truth is, that is authors, have the luxury of, you get done, and then you can go back, and you can change the beginning, or you can then implant these things that will make sense, because now you're
Right.
at the end and you know what it's going to be.
Right.
So do you find yourself revising in that way, or are you pretty much straight through?
I have a bad habit of going back and constantly editing
Sure.
everything that I've written already. So I'm trying to get out of that habit just so I can actually complete a draft.
Well, yeah.
And once I do that, yeah, I would definitely do that. Go back,
Okay.
yeah, based on the ending that I have, if I like it, go back and then just really set up that ending throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. The playwright Neil Simon wrote a book called Rewrite, and he says writing is rewriting. But I think what we can't do is not make progress. In other words, you
Right.
can't rewrite the first chapter 6 times. Write it and move on. And in fact, I know another author, T. Jefferson Parker, who his first couple or 3 novels, he said he just sat down and wrote, beginning to end, put them in the drawer, and never looked at it again.
Yeah.
for that draft, because what it taught him when he got to the end was he says, now I know the story. Now I know how to do it. And so then he would rewrite it. But again, it wasn't write a chapter, fix a chapter. It was write the whole thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, now we got to your novel. Would you be comfortable talking about that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I love talking about my novel.
Okay.
And yeah, I think this is obviously a great place to do that. I never talk about it too much because I'm afraid of like talking people's ear off about it.
Well, before you start, let me just say, I'm not so worried about that. Sometimes I think these projects have energy, and you're the vessel for the energy, and you've got it bottled up, and it's like the fizz of a soda pop.
Yeah.
When you take that top off, the fizz goes away. And depending on where you're at in the project, if you're far enough along that you're pretty solid, then I think we're okay. But I just didn't want you to tell us the story, and now it's already told, so you don't write it. I want you to write it, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay, so now, having
Well, I
said
can tell
that,
you like up to the point that I have, which is like maybe a third of the way into the
Okay.
book, so things are just starting to pick up. But
okay,
anyway, it's a fantasy novel set in a fantasy world with a steampunk level of technology. So they
Okay.
have airships,
Okay.
Steam engines, things like
and
that.
is this on Earth or somewhere else?
It's set in a different world, so not
Okay,
on Earth. Yeah.
okay,
So the main character, her name is Dessa. She and her family are lifting gas harvesters. So they have this boat that they live on, and then they take that boat out to the kind of this place where this giant fantasy seaweed grows up out of the ocean, and
Okay.
it has like bladders filled with lifting gas that they harvest to put in the airship balloons.
okay,
So that's their job, but they are in danger of losing their boat. The owners of the company are going to sell off the boat at the end of the seasons, but they don't want that to happen because it's their home. They want to keep that boat. So they have to raise enough money or earn enough money to buy the boat before that happens, which means Dessa has to go find an alternate source of revenue. So she goes onto the island where they dock their boat and meets the son of the governor of the island, who has he's working on setting up a racing venture with these giant bird-like creatures called avians.
okay.
And he needs somebody to ride his avian in the races. And he hasn't been able to find anybody. So even though Dessa doesn't have any experience, he's like, hey, do you want to ride my avian?
Yeah.
And she needs money, and it pays pretty well. So she's like, okay, I'll do it. And things
I think
go
we're
from
going to
there.
see this on Pixar. No. And,
Yeah.
and then and more complications ensue.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Many adventures ensue.
Okay. Any bit of a love story there, or attraction, or that's not part of this?
I'm trying to decide
Could be.
on that.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, okay. Well, good. We're kind of out of time. Anything else about NaNoWriMo that you want to let us know about?
I think-
So what are the dates? You said November?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So November 1st through 30th, 30 days in November. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes it can be kind of challenging to get your word count done around the holidays, but
Right.
if you're really committed to that goal, it is doable. I know because I was able to do it last year.
Yeah. And actually, I was thinking about that too. It's tough. You have to be disciplined. You have
Right.
to sit down and do the work. I've said this before, but I had a teacher tell me one time, the problem is everybody wants to have written. They don't want to write. They want to have written.
Right. I understand that.
Well, best of luck to you. Let us
you.
know if you make your goal again.
Yes.
When your book comes out, we want to have you back on here. Okay?
All right.
Well, I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us. And if you have any interest in NaNoWriMo, easy to Google that, look it up, participate. And I just think it's just such a fabulous thing. I'm a little bit jealous of the fellow who started that. And I'm Stephen W. Long. You can contact me at stephenwlong.com and write and let me know what you think of the show, if you'd like to see a particular guest on here, or if you have a topic that you'd like us to discuss. And we'll just see you next time. Thank you so much. And thank
What do you think? We done?
I don't know, you guys want to do one just with yourself without me doing the
As long as they think we're
bongos?
done, if
No,
they got
no,
enough, they got enough.
They got enough? Probably, okay, sounds good.
Let's go lunch. I'm
Oh.
hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could just bite too.